Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Lost One podcast. Joining me today, we have Shoshima 1016.
Yo.
Again, no Samurai today. He is busy with actual real-life stuff.
I'm just here for fake life.
Yeah, he's here for fake life because you've had a pretty busy week this week. We were just talking about how he doesn't remember his last day off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, see, and even Tanner agrees. Tanner's whining, too, if you guys can hear that. But, Tanner, come here, boy. Come here. Stop whining. Come here. We're live, like, right now, my dude. Come on. Let's go. If you're going to provide your commentary, you at least have to appear in the video. Come on. There we are.
There's the Tanner boy.
Yeah. So, anyway, today we're going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. We're going back to the MCU after our Winter Soldier episode. And we've talked a bit before about how Phase 2 didn't really have a great start, right?
Yeah.
Between Iron Man 3 and Thor the Dark World.
Uh-huh.
Ugh. Rough start, in our opinion. But we did just finish talking about arguably the greatest MCU movie outside of an Avengers film, at least in my opinion, Captain America and the Winter Soldier. And we're going to come now with this episode.
Which is, again, in my opinion, one of the greatest MCU movies.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Not the Avengers.
Me too, this is another one of like the best quote-unquote solo films, because it's not really a solo movie, but of all time. And there's a lot to talk about here, so let's just dive in. So we're not even going to do like a preamble or anything. We're just going to dive right into it. So for those that don't know, the Guardians of the Galaxy were at best considered a C-team list of characters. Longtime listeners might remember when we talked about Iron Man, and now he was a pretty interesting choice to open this new expanded universe idea.
Yeah.
Because he was a quote-unquote B-tier comic book hero. Well, the Guardians are... If Iron Man is B tier, then the Guardians are definitely C tier.
And low end on the C tier.
Yeah,
you know?
they're...
In the pyramid of C tier, they're still the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, they were very, very not well known to anyone except for probably like the hardcorest of comic book fans.
Yeah.
Their own quote-unquote comic book line was not super successful.
Okay.
And... they have constantly had a changing lineup. Like, they've always mattered to an extent, but usually their, like, best-selling stuff was in crossover events.
Oh, okay.
Where there was, other things that brought the Guardians to work with, like, the mainline Avengers or something like that. So, for the most part, the Guardians, like, most people probably knew who Rocket Raccoon was.
I knew Rocket Raccoon from Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Yeah, and probably Drax the Destroyer.
Yeah, I had no idea who Drax was before the movie.
But yeah, of those, of the Guardians, the others weren't really super well known.
Yeah.
And it's pretty crazy that when we think of where they are now in 2023 when we're recording this, they're now considered an A tier, super popular, and just absolutely incredible team of superheroes.
Yeah, I mean, they even have a decent game to their name.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one that. Just big shout out to me. They actually put a streamer mode in.
Yes.
Which, big shout out to the developers for that. As a streamer, thank you so much, because the whole DMCA thing is always a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I feel like just, general video game developers have been, realizing this.
Yeah.
So if they put licensed music, they've been conscious enough to...
Yeah, but I want to give it a big shout out to the team, that team in particular, because, the game is really good, and while I would argue that you do need the original soundtrack to get the full effect, the replacement soundtrack is not bad.
Actually, as far as, OSTs, I have this on my phone, and I listen to it regularly.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, so it's pretty good.
Honestly.
And that's going to be a recurring theme we'll talk about here in the Guardians movies, is the Guardians tend to now be associated with some pretty good soundtracks.
Yes.
I haven't seen, so just full transparency, at the time of this recording, Guardians Volume 3 has come out, but neither of us have seen it yet, so we're not going to talk anything about that.
Yeah, we can't talk about anything about that.
But it is something that, the rumor and innuendo is the soundtrack for Guardians 3 is pretty freaking good too.
Okay.
Following Guardians 2 and Guardians 1, that seems to be a recurring theme where...
Yeah, music's been a pretty big part of the movies.
I would argue that, maybe, unless you want to argue Iron Man, which has a really good soundtrack, I would say the Guardians films have the best soundtracks of the MCU, and it's not even close.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
But yeah, so the Guardians were essentially a C tier, and there are lots of stories about how many film critics were wondering if this was going to be Marvel's first box office bomb. Because even though Thor: The Dark World and Iron Man 3 were not considered, quote unquote, good movies, especially in hindsight, for us, right? I don't want to speak for everybody because some people love Iron Man 3, but I don't think anyone defends
They're called weirdos.
I don't think anyone defends Thor: The Dark World.
No.
Not even Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman.
It gave Natalie Portman's character cancer.
God. Spoilers for Thor: Love and Thunder, by the way. And also comics.
Yeah, I'd say that's a comic thing. It's not.
It is a comic thing, yeah. And it's a couple years old at that point. But yeah, the Guardians though had a lot of negative press leading up to it because you essentially had a whole bunch of unknown heroes that were not known by the mainstream at all. The concept itself seemed ludicrous, right? Especially when you're incorporating a talking raccoon and a talking tree.
Yeah.
Plus, aliens, and they also cast, notably, Dave Bautista, the wrestler, which was his first, major role outside of wrestling. And Bautista actually has a really funny story about, trying to get WWE to promote Guardians. Because
really?
he was in it, and he had, for those that don't know, non-wrestling fans, Dave Bautista was really close friends with Hunter Hearst Helmsley, a.k.a. Triple H, who is one of the big shots behind the scenes, one of their longtime stars. And so he had a good connection there. Stephanie McMahon, of course, was head of creative. They could have easily worked something out, to do some kind of promotion, have Batista appear. And Batista says no one in WWE, which for those that knew Vince, who was in charge at the time, that's not surprising. He doesn't know any modern day pop culture, but not even Triple H and Stephanie, who tend to be a little bit more on top of what's going on. Not even they believed in this movie. And, I think that's a big credit to the cast, James Gunn, to the team of writers, the producers, to everybody who worked on this movie.
Yeah.
And turned this, what literally everyone was saying, I mean, you could probably still Google it in archives. If you just look Guardians of the Galaxy bomb, you will probably find a list of articles from some of the top movie critics and top websites at the time.
Yeah. Saying
this is going to be Marvel's first failure. And I bet also because YouTube was a wild place at this time in 2014, YouTube also probably had 1 million videos predicting the downfall of this movie. I'm not even kidding how much negative press there was leading up to this movie. And as it turns out, as we already kind of gave away the goat at the beginning here.
Yeah, we spoiled it.
This is arguably one of the greatest movies in the MCU. And I can tell you, I just rewatched it the other day. It still holds up extremely well. I would argue out of most of the older MCU films, this one probably holds up among the best.
Okay.
Because Winter Soldier, while it's still amazing and it's a great spy action thriller, you still kind of have to understand a little bit about the previous movies in order to watch that. Guardians is literally, you don't need to know anything, you can just go right in.
Yeah, as far as a movie itself, it's fairly standalone, other than and we talked before how there's Infinity Stones in the movie.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's not a lot of connections.
This movie is unique in that it is an entirely standalone story that you can watch in a vacuum, while also doing so much to explain the greater lore in the MCU. And it's amazing how they managed to do this. Again, I've said this before, but James Gunn really, really did a good job pretty much everywhere across the board here, whether it was from casting, from the writing, to the direction, to the scenes. There really isn't a part of this movie that is bad. And that's really, really hard to say, especially for a comic book movie featuring a group of individuals that literally nobody knew anything about prior to this.
Yeah.
Except for the hardcores. I do see you, but...
You do? I don't see anybody.
Well, that's because we talked about John Cena too much, so you're still distracted by the invisibility. I gotcha. But with that being said, let's kind of talk a little bit of background about these particular characters and the actors who were cast them. So, Chris Pratt, at this point in his career, was a comedy guy.
Yes.
He was known as the overweight comedy guy on that sitcom.
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, yeah. And he came into this movie looking like a freaking action hero.
But he was also, when he was cast, he did not look like an action
No,
hero.
he did not. And
You know,
and so I know it's popular to hate on Chris Pratt because of his alleged religious ties with his church, among other things that have come out. But I want to give him full credit where credit is due here. He really embraced this role, and
Yeah, he put in the work.
he put in the work, and this is what launched him to his quote-unquote superstardom.
Because if I'm not mistaken, too, and I could be totally wrong.
Yeah.
Did he? I don't know if he had like a whole like paid workout regimen and like nutritionist. I don't think for this.
Yeah, I don't
Or
know.
I could be totally wrong.
Yeah,
I mean,
he might have, but I honestly don't know enough about that. But I do know that like he went from being the, funny comic relief overweight character in Parks and Rec
Yeah.
to Star-Lord, to looking, feeling, and quite frankly, crushing it. And now if you see him in like a lot of movies, he's in really good shape.
Yeah.
So major props to him for that. Zoe Saldana cast as Gamora. And Gamora is a pretty important character in the comics. Star-Lord obviously is kind of the de facto leader of the Guardians in pretty much every iteration.
Yeah, but my favorite is when like he is the leader.
Yeah.
But everyone just gives him shit and like doesn't listen to him.
Yeah,
like,
well,
that's
pretty
usually,
much. And
as far as the team dynamic.
yeah, and that's not so different from how they are in the comics either.
Yeah.
But he does command a bit of respect.
No, he does. I'm
And-
just saying, yeah.
And he is a good tactical leader, and we'll see that many times over with, in future films when he appears in the crossovers for Infinity
Yeah.
War in particular. He does come up with the plan
Yeah.
to beat Thanos, and he's almost successful.
Yeah.
There's some criticism we'll get into that we kind of talked about a bit in the Winter Soldier about how the Guardians have been handled in the future. We'll talk about that at the end after we kind of address everything else, because there's so much with this movie going on in the background, more so than a lot of the other MCU stuff.
Yeah.
Zoe Saldana, who many may not remember, but had a huge role in James Cameron's Avatar, and now is being introduced into another juggernaut in the MCU. And she crushes it as Gamora in everything that she's done.
Yeah, I've seen the memes for Zoe. It's like, oh, you need a really badass like person in this sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
She's your girl.
Pretty much.
That, and then there was she was in that movie with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
The time traveling.
Yeah.
So it's just like now she's like being typecast into sci-fi movies almost.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing because of how much money she's probably making
Oh,
off that.
she's laughing her way to the bank, and I'm happy for her for that.
Yeah, and as we've seen too with Gamora in particular, like she is definitely getting to show her range. So she's not being typecast in the way like Adam West was typecast as Batman. Thankfully, that's not so much of an issue. Now, I'm not going to say it's not an issue because I'm sure there's a lot of Asian actors who would probably strongly disagree with that.
Yeah.
And they're probably right. But it's definitely not as bad as it used to be, where it's like, oh no, you just had this role and they could never see you do anything else.
They made a whole movie about that.
Yeah,
it's called Birdman.
They did. Yeah, this is true. But yeah, so then moving on, we have Bradley Cooper as the voice of Rocket. Sean Gunn handles all of the actual like performance capture for Rocket Raccoon, who's James Gunn's brother, and Sean also does, I believe he plays Kraglin, who's one of the Ravengers. He's like kind of the right hand man to Yondu.
Yeah, Yondu. I was like, oh man, I can't remember his name.
So Bradley Cooper though really brings a really good energy and attitude to Rocket.
Yes.
His vocal work is really impressive, and
I do know at the time a lot of people were hoping it'd be like a Jason Statham or something, just because.
Yeah.
Like, that is how Rocket almost does sound in every other media he's been in.
That is true, yeah.
But I do feel Bradley Cooper knocked it out of the park and made a good, like, Rocket for the MCU.
I think so, too. And it also has come out that Rocket is James Gunn's favorite character in the Guardians. So it is kind of a bit of a story. Like, Quill is the focus of the Guardians films, really. But Rocket also has like a really, really good character arc throughout this.
All do, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that like Drax doesn't necessarily have the best character arc, unfortunately.
Yeah, true.
And that's not Dave Bautista's fault. That's, I think, just the way he was written in the first Guardians film compared to how he is in the comics. That's a sort of controversy we'll address here in a second. And then, as we kind of talked about in Winter Soldier, I guess this is a good time to bring it up, like, Drax and Mantis really don't get anything to do in any of the crossovers. So whereas, like, Gamora gets her moment in the sun, Rocket kind of gets his moment, Groot, obviously, the Peter Quill obviously has a big moment.
Yeah.
But Drax and Nebula, of course, who would kind of become, not really join the Guardians, at least not at this point.
Yeah.
But, become, one of their allies through the first two films. She would also have a pretty big character moment and spotlight in Infinity War. And even in Endgame, too, to an extent. But Drax and Mantis don't really get any love. They don't really get to do anything. They have very few moments. Batista, I think, steals every scene he's in. And, the few scenes that Mantis has as well are also really good. But
yeah.
They just, as far as, like, plot and relevance, they don't really have a whole lot in the crossovers, which is really unfortunate. Which is a big part of why in the Guardians Holiday Special, they kind of play a bigger role.
Yeah.
Because James Gunn wanted to give them something to do. But unfortunately, in Infinity War and Endgame, they were kind of relegated to not really doing anything. And there's been a lot of criticism of the way that Marvel handled Drax in particular. Mantis's character is pretty much true to how she is in the comics, more or less. There's been some changes. But Drax was changed drastically.
Drastically.
From his... you need to take a drink for that. And maybe do a lap, as Tech would say. Drax, unfortunately, was changed very much. And not necessarily for the better, depending on your interpretation. Comic book fans hated it. Batista has even talked about like how after Guardians 3, he does not want to come back. Because,
really?
Because of the way Drax was handled and the way Drax was written. And Batista, as we kind of talked about in the John Cena pod, I think out of the big wrestling guys who became big actors, he's probably the most well-rounded. And Drax is a very one-dimensional type character, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And even James Gunn, who's done a really good job and really gave, I think, Batista his big break and more to do than any of the other directors, including the Russos, who we heaped a lot of praise on, 2 weeks ago. There's not much they can work with Drax. And so, with the way he's written and the way he's been handled. And it's unfortunate. But, yeah, we'll just kind of dive in now. Dave Batista, the former WWE World Heavyweight Champion, who was accused by wrestling fans as being bland during his babyface run, which is good guy for those who do not know that babyface means good guy in wrestling. He was cast as Drax. That was arguably one of the biggest surprise castings in this movie.
Yeah.
Because out of pretty much everybody else, he was like the biggest unknown.
Yeah.
And that's saying something when you're going from Chris Pratt, who's a comedy actor, and you have Bradley Cooper, who again people were like, I don't know if that's going to be a good Rocket Raccoon. And with all due respect to Zoe Saldana, she was the one real established name at this point.
Yeah.
But man, it's a big ask. And Batista was cast, and it was launched him into superstardom.
Yeah.
And, he has a very close relationship with James Gunn. Batista's never been shy about expressing his opinion on anything. Seems to be a really good dude from everything I could tell. But, he got his big break here with Drax the Destroyer, and we'll just get around it. Drax the Destroyer in this movie is written as a comedy character. And in the comics, that is the polar opposite of who Drax is. Drax is a literal living weapon designed to kill Thanos. In the comics, he is someone who is feared across the galaxy. That's why he's called the Destroyer. And he is supposed to be able to go one-on-one with Thanos.
Yeah.
And we will never see that happen in the MCU.
No.
Spoilers, everybody. But it's really unfortunate because while Batista nails the role, he looks impressive, he is impressive, quite frankly, and he has amazing comedic timing in this movie. Drax can't even fight Ronan without a Power Stone.
Yeah.
And Ronan is supposed to be a powerful character, don't get me wrong, But fans of Drax were really disappointed because it's like, man, if he can't even take on Ronan, how on earth is he going to have that showdown with Thanos?
Yeah.
And spoiler, he does not.
Yeah.
He never really gets that opportunity. He does fight Thanos with the Guardians, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, and, of course, Iron Man. But he never really gets that kind of one-on-one fight or that satisfaction to his character arc, which, for those that don't know, his character arc in this movie is the reason why he allies with the Guardians, unlike everyone else who's into it for more selfish reasons. He's trying to avenge his wife and daughter, who Ronan killed and on Thanos' order. So he's on a quest for vengeance and justice. And even though Thanos and Ronan both get theirs,
it's not by the hand of Drax.
It's not by the hand of Drax. And a lot of his fans, myself included, were very disappointed with that decision. I understand why Marvel did it. I get it. But it is a big disappointment that we didn't get to see Drax as he is in the comics, which is 350 plus pounds of purified badassery.
Yeah.
And I use 350 because that's probably where Batista was. But we didn't really get to see that in any of the Guardians movies or even in the Avengers movies either. And it's pretty unfortunate. Now, I haven't seen Guardians 3, so maybe he has that moment there. But he is pretty much played as a comedy character and throughout his entire run. And don't get me wrong, again, Batista does a great job. This is not Dave Batista's fault.
No, not at all.
But I think just the way that they had I think they wrote the Guardians in such a way to where their impact wouldn't necessarily be big on the off chance that this movie failed. Because this was the biggest gamble that Marvel and Disney at this point were taking.
Yeah.
Moving on through the cast, we'd be remiss if we don't mention a very big name who's all about family and fits right in with this theme. Vin Diesel voices Groot.
I thought this was a weird choice, personally.
It is an extremely weird choice.
Like,
but with that being said, for someone whose only line, with one exception, is "I am Groot,"
yeah,
I think he did a good job.
And I heard he recorded every single line separately.
He did. I think it's over 3,000 different lines with different cadence and approach and emotion into the 3 words "I am Groot."
Yeah.
He also does have "We are Groot," so technically it's not all of his lines.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's recorded, I think, over the life of the Guardians over 3,000 times in different ways, shapes, and or forms, the words "I am Groot."
Yeah.
So yeah, Vin Diesel, really strange choice here.
Yeah, because he's a very big name for 3 words.
Yeah, and who doesn't even appear in person at all. Because Groot is entirely CGI.
Yeah.
So he literally, I don't think, even appeared on any scene ever with on site
On set?
studio on set. Thank you on set. All right, I just had a total brain fart there. Yeah, so that kind of rounds out the main cast. It's also notable that we have Michael Rooker, who very famously was on Walking Dead.
Yep.
Appeared as Yondu.
Yep, Mary Poppins Yondu.
And I think is it Benicio del Toro? That's how you pronounce his name, right?
I believe, yeah. But
as the Collector.
Yes.
And man, that's another actor who it's wow, I am shocked they got him to play this role. And he's perfect, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But man, just very, very strange cast. Yeah, and this movie is, just, again, a pretty crazy cast when you think about it. Just some weird choices, some unexpected choices, definitely some gambles. And, man, it comes together beautifully. We talked about this a bit. We've mentioned DC a little bit on the podcast, usually during the Thor episodes. But it is notable that James Gunn also directed the Suicide Squad. And that was also really good. So the running joke is that James Gunn seems to have a talent for taking a group of misfits and teaming them up and making the movie work against all odds.
I know, I don't know if it was a meme or I heard it somewhere where it's man, like, because they're probably rebooting the whole DCEU now.
Oh, they absolutely have to.
I'm just but so the best like of this iteration, the best character was Peacemaker.
Yeah.
Like for Peacemaker to be like the best character, who I had no idea who the fuck Peacemaker was before.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people did. But
So,
I got to give again major credit to John Cena for living the character, and again to James Gunn for writing him in such a way that made him so memorable.
Yeah, I think just between the two of them coming together.
Yeah. But again, it just goes to show that James Gunn, I think he really does have his finger on the pulse, and I think DC's in good hands with him at the helm. At least I hope so. As a comic book fan, I want them to succeed. But man, they got a lot of obstacles they got to overcome. Mm-hmm. But that's another story. Going back to the Guardians, though, let's kind of give a very brief summary of this movie. Peter Quill, Star-Lord, is abducted after losing his mother to cancer.
Yeah.
Several years later, he's grown up to be one of the Ravengers, but he goes rogue. Drops a score ahead of the actual Ravengers. Mm-hmm. In a very funny moment, forgot that he had someone sleeping in his ship.
Yeah.
Which was pretty funny. So he's automatically introduced as kind of this scoundrel. While he's stealing this orb, which again was a job that the Ravengers were supposed to be hired to do, and he jumped the gun, he gets stopped by none other than Korat the Pursuer.
Oh, speaking of which, his way to the orb was just a beautiful scene, by the way.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Putting on the music and like kicking the lizards and shit.
Oh, and then the best part is that they redo that scene from the perspective of War Machine and Nebula, so you don't hear the music,
yes.
and you're reminded of how ridiculous this is, and it's chef's kiss.
Like,
just
but
amazing.
That's pure Star-Lord right there.
Yeah, 100%, and like immediately, and again, I know it's popular to hate on Chris Pratt, but man,
dude, he's Mario. Hey, he didn't do that bad of a job. Just
no,
saying.
he did not. But take a drink for that, because now you've just opened another fucking can of worms on this episode. God damn it! See what I have to deal with, everybody. This is what I have to deal with.
Shoshima, the can opener, 1016.
God. By the way, Vin left a comment on one of our episodes about calling Sean a coward. So look what you've started.
See?
Yeah.
It's getting traction.
God. Anyway. We'll have words off when we're not recording. Yeah, he doesn't get paid, so I can't fire him.
Yeah, what are you going to do, not pay me?
Yeah. But yeah, so right away,
I have to buy my own beer.
Chris Pratt, not always, I buy you beer every now and then.
Yeah, so Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt right away establishes what kind of character Star-Lord is. He's a goofball. He's a loser. And
yeah, just that. I think that scene just sets it up, and you kind of know what you're in for the rest of the movie.
Pretty much.
If you dig that scene, you know?
It is absolutely this is setting the stage for how this movie is going to be, including the amazing soundtrack where it opens up with "Come and Get Your Love."
Yes.
And it's man, that's a banger.
Which, this movie helped repopularize because it wasn't, again, popular at the time.
Same with, oh my gosh.
Hooked on a Feeling?
Hooked on a Feeling, thank you, yeah. That song in particular really got a revamp from this. Ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga chaka, ooga, ooga. Everybody, knew that song in 2014 again, after a long time of being kind of on the shelf, shall we say.
Yeah.
But... yeah, so immediately, he goes in, he steals the orb, he has his Walkman, he's jamming out, and he's singing with the lizards, he's kicking them in tune with the beat, he's spinning around, he's just having a good time, jumping in puddles. You can immediately tell he's a goofball, right off the bat. And I can just say, for me, a little bit of commentary here, this is when I knew Chris Pratt was going to do great.
Yeah.
Because I had never really seen him in Parks and Rec. I'd never really seen any of his work prior to this. So he was an unknown to me at this point. Because for those that don't know, I'm not a big sitcom guy. So I don't watch sitcoms. Especially not comedy ones. Not really my thing. But
yeah, Shenzo does not like to laugh.
I do not. I am a very miserable person. As I'm sure all of you know. But yeah, just immediately I was like, he's going to do great. As soon as I saw this was the approach they were taking to the character, and Pratt leaned all the way into it. Yeah. Because you could tell he was into it. He was having a blast. And I was like, we're set. We're good.
Speaking of leaning all the way in, can I tell a super quick side tangent, personal story?
Sure. Go for it.
So, we were driving a tractor the other day because my sister-in-law had like a whole bunch of weeds.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was sitting on the tractor with my daughter, and it's one you have to have like the 2 levers, like it controls each side of the tread.
Yeah, it's tank controls.
Yeah. For her to like do it, she was like this, just full lean into it, full send. She couldn't see. She's looking straight down, but full send.
Yeah, that sounds like your daughter.
This tractor is just fucking going.
Yeah, that sounds like your daughter.
So
that is your strategy. So she definitely gets that from you.
I know. She's a little mini. I just wanted to interject you said he just leaned into it, and it just reminded me of her.
Yeah, no.
Just full sending that tractor.
See, that's the type of sidebar I can get behind. So thank you for that. A little peek behind the curtain here. I've had to talk with both Samurai and Shoshima about how when we're trying to wrap up to not get us into sidebar so we can end the episode. And I'm sure you guys don't mind it, but it's like, we've been here for like 2 hours. Let's wrap this up, please. Come on. So
for the love of God, I don't want to be with you any more than I have to.
Pretty much, exactly. See? But yeah, a little peek behind the curtain there for a little context. But yeah, so Star-Lord gets... he gets confronted by Korath the Pursuer and a couple others. He basically outthinks them all and escapes. In a really comical scene where, like, the ship freaks out and then this half-dressed young lady comes out and Star-Lord's like, I forgot you were even there.
Yeah, because he flew to that like deserted planet with her
on the ship, and he like totally forgot about her. So again, once establishing immediately like this is not a good person. Like Star-Lord is not a good person, and he essentially it finds out that Korath was hired by none other than
Ronan, right?
Ronan, who is working for Thanos. So immediately we were established that Thanos, who had made a very brief cameo in the End of Adventures and has not been mentioned really since, he now makes his first real appearance in the MCU.
Yeah, in this, like, quote-unquote standalone movie that we've been kind of playing up, but at the same time,
And yet it still works as a standalone story because of the connection with Gamora, who is Thanos' adopted daughter.
Yeah, not only that, but just you don't need to know who Thanos is per se, and we don't even really know who Thanos is per se at this time.
So and we know, like comic book fans know, that Thanos is after the Infinity Stones. It's kind of his thing. And so if Korath was sent to retrieve this item, and Korath is working for Ronan, Ronan is working for Thanos, Star-Lord just stole a freaking Infinity Stone. Like that's the connection that like all comic book nerds will make.
No, that was an orb. It was not a stone.
And we'll reveal it later. Well, the stone was in the orb.
I know, that was the joke.
Yeah. So, but it's, basically Ronan actually kills the voice of Thanos, like, in front of him. Pretty badass, establishing Ronan as fearless.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Ronan the Accuser is a Kree accuser, his title.
What?
And his job is basically, he's one of the higher-ups in the Kree hierarchy. He's basically judge, jury, and executioner for any kind of Kree-related matter. Very powerful individual in the comics. But he's also a fanatic. He believes in Kree dominance above all else. And the Kree are a very advanced, militarized society in comic books, along with the Skrulls. The Skrulls will not make their debut until much, much later. Captain Marvel specifically. But they are essentially one of the great military powerhouses of the Marvel Universe in the mainstream comic line. And Ronan has broken away from them because he believes in Kree dominance and Kree superiority. He's essentially a Kree supremacist.
Yeah.
And we learn in this movie that the Kree Empire has signed a treaty with the Nova Corps, which are another big military powerhouse. But compared to the Kree, they're nothing. Like, they're extremely weak compared to the Kree, but they're still one of the quote-unquote big players in the galaxy as far as, like, military power. It's just the Kree are on another level, because the Kree are an empire, the Nova Corps are based primarily on Nova Prime. So, one planet versus, like, hundreds of thousands. And the Kree, here we learn that Ronan is actually going against his own government. Because of his extremist views, and he's allied with the Mad Titan Thanos, who's another one of, like, the galaxy's powerhouses.
Yeah.
But he's a powerhouse for a different reason. He's not so much interested in building an empire. He's all about, in the comics, he's all about pleasing Death, who is a literal female personification of death.
Yep.
So he like worships her as a goddess and is in love with her, and hilariously enough loses out to Deadpool of all people.
I was gonna make sure we bring that up.
And in fact, in some canon, Thanos actually is the one who granted Deadpool his immortality.
Oh, really?
Yeah, out of jealousy,
Yeah.
because that way Death can never fully claim him, so they can never truly be together. So, interesting, fun little love triangle that of all people you have a literal cosmic entity in Death.
Yeah.
You have the Mad Titan Thanos, who's literally so powerful that he can wield the Infinity Stones. He's one of the few people who can do so without any side effects.
Yeah.
And then there's fucking Deadpool.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so yeah.
And then Deadpool wins out on the love triangle.
He does. Death loves Deadpool. So, yeah, another interesting little comic aside there. Here, of course, Death is not so well defined. Thanos isn't so much obsessed with death, is more obsessed with balance. So the obsession is still there. It's similar, but it is a significant change from his comic part.
Yeah.
Counterpart, not comic part.
His comic part.
Yes, his comic part. But here, we know Thanos is after the Infinity Stones, and it demonstrates that, like, as badass as Ronan is, Thanos is better, is stronger. Ronan fears Thanos. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, as kind of a way to keep Ronan in check, Thanos sends his favorite daughter, Gamora, and his non-favorite daughter, Nebula,
Poor Nebula.
as escorts to make sure that Ronan doesn't go crazy and manages to retrieve the job. Because essentially Ronan is their reporting failure. Like, they were sent to retrieve the Power Stone.
Didn't get said
But didn't get it. They lost out to this idiot with his...
singing lizards.
Singing lizards and his Walkman from the 80s. And his mixtape. But, yeah, so... we kind of switch over, and Yondu finds out that Quill, beat him to the punch, stole the Power Stone, was going to strike out on his own. Yondu puts a bounty on Quill's head. Quill goes to Nova Prime, because that's where their buyer is. When the buyer learns that Ronan's involved, he wants nothing to do with it, because Ronan is an extremist, and as I mentioned, the Kree Empire has just signed a peace treaty with the Nova Corps. But what ends up happening is Yondu puts a huge bounty on Star-Lord's head, which attracts Rocket and Groot, who are essentially bounty hunters, escaped convicts bounty hunters. Gamora, meanwhile, convinces Ronan to send her after the Power Stone, after Quill. Because she knows the area better than Nebula and certainly better than Ronan. Ronan can't go there without causing some kind of international incident. Not that Ronan cares, but Ronan's whole thing is like, hey, I'm going to work for Thanos if you wipe out the Nova Corps for me. And so that's what he does. And basically, long story short, a giant three-way struggle between Rocket and Groot trying to kidnap... who are not aware of the Power Stone, not aware of the orb, trying to kidnap Quill to secure the bounty.
Yeah.
Gamora trying to retrieve the Power
orb.
Stone. And Quill, who's trying to maintain the Power Stone, flirt with Gamora, escape the Rocket and Groot, and escape, and they all get apprehended by the Nova Corps and arrested.
Yeah.
They get taken to a prison. And it's learned that Gamora was trying to actually use the orb as Gamora has a buyer, who we will later find out is the Collector, who originally hired the Ravengers. Funny enough. And basically was going to use the orb to buy her way out of Thanos' thumb and Ronan's thumb. She was going to escape. Quill was doing the same thing with the Ravengers.
Yep.
And I don't know if we mentioned, but the Ravengers were the ones who abducted Quill. So
yes.
Yondu and Kraglin and the other Ravengers. And for those that don't know the Ravengers, because we've dropped their names a couple times, they basically say it in the movie. They're a group of thieves that, with the line, steal from everyone, but not each other. That's kind of the goal. It's a lot like a thieves guild or a mafia type setup with them. And we'll later learn that there's an honor code in Guardians 2 that Yondu broke. But that's another story. So we have instead, they go to prison, they all bond, Gamora is a pretty big enemy because, she's the daughter of Thanos, adopted daughter, as Gamora will be very quick to remind everybody. Yeah. And we're introduced to Drax the Destroyer, who was arrested, presumably for attacking people while trying to get his way to Ronan. Mm-hmm. And he decides to target Gamora. Quill saves her, convinces Drax that she'll be more useful alive, because Ronan will probably come looking for her, which means Drax can then kill Ronan. Mm-hmm. And Rocket ends up facilitating the escape plan, where we also learn that he has a fetish for stealing body parts. He wants to steal someone's leg, and then he'll later want to steal someone's eye, and then he will also want to steal Bucky's arm. He likes body parts.
I need his leg. What do you need the leg for? I just need it.
Yeah, and it turns out it was just hilarious. Yeah, it was just because he could.
Oh, you actually got the leg? That's so hilarious.
Yeah, could you imagine him walking around without it? But Rocket facilitates the escape plan. They all agree to work together, split the bounty 4 ways. 4, as Groot will constantly remind everybody, he is a member of the team. The plan goes awry when Groot just steals the part that sets off all the alarms, but they do succeed. Quill manages to retrieve his Walkman, which I believe Drax, who at first is impressed by him single-handedly challenging all the Nova Corps prisoners in order to get it back, when he really realizes what it is, he's like, "You're an idiot." Like, Drax the Destroyer, Mr. Literal himself, is calling Quill an idiot. They go to Nowhere, which is the corpse of a dead Celestial, which will become very important later.
That's a very cool concept as a planet, by the way.
It really is. They meet with the Collector, and for those who don't know, in the comics, the Collector is not really a Celestial, but he's a pretty big player. He's actually brothers, fun fact, with the Grandmaster from Thor Ragnarok.
Oh, okay.
They're brothers in the comics. They're family. But yeah, they're like really ancient, near immortal beings.
Okay.
They're I don't think they qualify as Celestials per se, but they're pretty big players in the grand scheme of things. And the Collector, who we actually were first introduced to at the end of Thor: The Dark World, is collecting the Infinity Stones. Yeah. And he gives some nice little background into how they were 6 singularities formed at the beginning of the universe. And the Power Stone is one of the most dangerous, where not just anyone can wield it. Its power is so great, it will literally disintegrate anyone who touches it. And again, very few beings can wield an Infinity Stone. Ronan, as it turns out, will be one of them. Thanos is another. But individuals, when faced with the power of the Power Stone, will literally be destroyed and result in a giant explosion, which is what happens when one of the Collector's slaves jumps on it and blows up, destroying the Collector's entire room, basically causing the deal to go awry, while Drax, who had gotten impatient from all the waiting, literally summoned Ronan to them. Drax promptly gets his ass handed to him, which again, as we talked about, was a pretty big oof for Drax the Destroyer fans. Ronan takes the Power Stone and then heads off to go destroy the Nova Corps himself. Basically saying, I have a Power Stone to Thanos. What are you going to frickin' do about it? Yeah. And as it turns out, Thanos will do nothing. He will do nothing.
Yeah, nothing at all.
Thanos will literally not do anything, canonically, for, I think, 3 years? He will sit on his throne and look menacing for 3 years.
Apparently.
So...
Yeah, I do like how Ronan, Sacred Jewel Shard his hammer with the Power Stone.
Pretty much. That's an Inuyasha reference for those that don't know. But, yeah, he puts it in his hammer and uses that to channel the power of the Power Stone. The Guardians eventually work out a deal with the Ravengers where they'll get the Power Stone in greed for helping them. They warn the Nova Corps, who surprisingly believe them. But this probably has to be, and I've seen this a lot, one of the most practical reasons for ever wanting to stop Ronan. And, of course, Thanos. If Ronan hangs on to the Power Stone, he will literally destroy the entire universe in the name of Kree supremacy. Rocket asks Quill, Star-Lord, what has the universe ever done for you? Why would you want to save it? Because I'm one of the idiots who lives in it!
Yeah.
Super practical, and no one can really argue with that.
No?
So the Guardians band together. They actually become heroes. They come up with a very complicated plan, team up with Yondu, who turns out is a super badass with his little whistling dagger thing.
Yeah.
And manage to just barely save the entirety of the Nova Prime planet and almost die in the process.
I did like that one like fight scene with Groot where he like brutalizes like 6 guards
and then just throws them around.
Yeah. He just but then at the end he just gives that little smile. Like,
yeah, he gives the.
Like, did I do good?
Yeah, you did
yeah.
good.
You just murder-fied like 6 dudes. Yeah, I think that was pretty good.
And that's kind of how it wraps up. It ends with Quill discovering that he is only half human. He had been believed to be full human the entire time.
Yep.
And Groot makes the big sacrifice to save his family. Mm-hmm. The Guardians stick together, their records are cleared, and they go off into the sunset. Thanos is left without an Infinity Stone. The Power Stone's left with the Nova Corps. And, man, the Nova Corps did get pretty messed up, though. They lost a lot of their military strength. But that's kind of the end of the summary. So we are 45 minutes in. I know we've talked about it a lot, but again, this is a very in-detailed episode. Lots of stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So let's kind of dive in, because I've been doing the most of the talking for the last 45 minutes. What's your favorite part about this movie? What does this movie mean to you?
I just liked the way it just brought, all these characters like together and just their, the interactions and the character development like that everyone has, some more than others.
Yep.
But just the way the band of misfits came together, it's actually turned them to one of like my more favorite like superhero teams.
Yeah.
And
I don't think you're alone in that. The Guardians' popularity, as I mentioned, has skyrocketed. They've gotten their own, basically like rides in Disney, in the Marvel section of Disney. They had their own video game. They're gonna, they've made guest appearances in a lot of more popular like animated media, like the Avengers and Spider-Man. And yeah, I mean, this James Gunn like single-handedly took this from a C-tier team and turned them into an A-list, single-handedly.
I mean, it's just like a group of assholes like having to work together. It's really what it comes down to.
Pretty much. I mean, and there's even a moment where like Drax is talking about how he lost his family, and instead of like comforting him, he's like, "You've lost people, I've lost people, Quill's lost people, like we've all lost people.
Yeah.
But we're not sitting here moping about it." Like that's his
pep talk.
Pep talk, yeah. It's amazing. So, I mean, I can't really. I think I've said enough already, but this movie is just fantastic. The character interactions, the chemistry between the cast, the affection that they have is very, very apparent. And they just do a really, really good job of establishing, like, across the board, like, these are not your typical heroes.
Yeah.
They are not good people by and large. All of them have criminal records. All of them have done things they regret.
Yeah,
but they're trying to be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the movie more or less starts off with them in jail.
Yeah. And it's definitely something where, again, James Gunn has a thing for taking a group of unlikable misfits and putting them together and somehow creating a working dynamic with them.
Yeah, he has a track record for that now.
He does. We're talking now with Guardians Volume 3, which has been a huge success. I think it's over 200 million opening weekend worldwide.
Oh, okay.
So big. It's on track to be like one of the biggest like Guardians films of all time. But that's what 4 movies he's done now. 3 not Suicide Squads. 3 Guardians movies and Suicide Squad.
Yeah, like 2 different groups, but yeah. Like 4 different great movies.
So again, just major props to him. But let's kind of talk more about the greater impact in the MCU. Obviously, we get the full lowdown on what the Infinity Stones are, why they matter in this movie.
Yeah.
We get to see the Power Stone and how strong it is firsthand. We got a little teaser of that with the Mind Stone in Loki, where he was brainwashing people with it.
Yeah.
But again, we don't know that yet. The Mind Stone won't be revealed to be in the staff until Age of Ultron, which is the next movie.
Yeah.
So here is really our first glimpse into seeing how truly devastating an Infinity Stone is. Because, we saw the Aether, but the Aether really only got to corrupt Jane Foster, and then it lost to Thor.
Yeah.
Malekith lost to Thor while using it. So we didn't really get to see the full power of the Reality Stone there yet. But here we get to see the Power Stone literally decimate people. And we see Ronan wreck people with it.
Yeah.
And almost destroy the entire planet. So it really ups the stakes. Like hey, this is a very dangerous weapon, and Thanos, who's looking for this, is going to be a big threat. So we kind of knew Thanos was being teased at the end of Avengers, but now the stakes have been upped. And again, that's kind of what makes this movie work so well, is that, it is a standalone story. And you don't really have to know anything else about the MCU to watch this. In fact, there's very little connections to anything else MCU related, aside from the Infinity Stones and a couple of mentions of Earth from Peter Quill.
Yeah, I feel like they have like lore in the background, but that's not the forefront of the story.
No, and it doesn't even take up a large majority. It's very small bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But it does such a good job of fitting in and not taking away from the other narrative.
Yeah.
Of the self-contained threat that is Ronan, while still reminding us that Thanos is still looming over that.
Yeah, there's still the greater MCU in the background.
So it's very well done. It's very well balanced. I have said this before, but I really do feel that the Russo brothers and James Gunn are three of the best directors the MCU hired. And just, I think it's evident in all of their films. They don't miss.
Yeah.
None of these three have not missed. And that's not a knock on the other directors, Jon Favreau, Shane Black, everyone else. But no one quite has this record of success in the MCU than James Gunn and the Russo brothers, who both have a minimum of 3 movies. The Russo brothers have 4.
Yeah.
Just big hits and huge successes under their belt. And notably, they also share a similar strength, is that they're very good at balancing all of the different characters and making sure that their characters have moments to shine.
Yeah.
With some exceptions, of course, but largely doing a really good job there. So, big shout out again to James Gunn. Amazing performance by all the cast members. Who is your MVP for this movie?
I mean, yeah, I think just in this movie, it's just got to be Groot. The whole "We Are Groot," like it still like just jerks at the emotions.
Yeah, it's weird to say Vin Diesel, but I can't.
I know, right?
I can't argue with you. I'm going to disagree. I'm going to give it to Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
But by the narrowest of margins, because I agree with you that Groot also has. I don't know how Vin Diesel managed to do this, because I don't hate Vin Diesel, but he does not come across as someone with this kind of range.
Yeah.
And to do it,
but his range is
do it with only 3 words, except for we at the end.
Yeah,
so
4. Yeah, 4
for the whole movie. Like, it's impressive. But I do have to give a lot of because a lot of it is like the facial expressions and stuff. So a lot of that comes to CGI for Groot too. But Vin Diesel I think is a weird choice, but I can't argue with it. But
exactly.
I do have to give it to Chris Pratt, because he just does such a good job of establishing who Star-Lord is immediately. And I just think I'm one of the idiots who lives in it. Like, the delivery of that line still, that's the standout line to me. That's the line I remember from this movie.
Yeah, no, it's still, he did great. And I did love Rocket, and then he just, tinkers together. What's this do? Oh, I think it can blow up a moon.
Yeah.
Like, that cannon.
Yeah. A dark horse for me, though, I think most underrated is Batista. He's absolutely the breakout star of this movie, 100%. That's saying something when you're going against, Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
But he takes everything that he brings the right amount of intensity and the right amount of humor with Drax. And, it's like he delivers these ridiculous lines.
Nothing can go over my head. My reflexes are too fast.
And he just delivers it with such a good, flat delivery.
I know.
He's phenomenal. And this is, again, the dawning of Batista as an actor. And my God, even though he's not my MVP, I have to give special recognition to him, because
for sure,
I don't think a single person, wrestling fans or the average viewer, looked at Batista and went, he's going to be a great breakout hit in this movie. And I think Batista proved everybody wrong with this performance.
Yeah, no, they just thought he was going to be big dumb muscle guy, which his character is.
Yeah, but he manages to really make Drax his own.
Yeah.
And I think as we talked about, Drax is a very one-dimensional character. I think a lot of the credit for Drax being as lovable as he is, and why people like Batista's performance as Drax, is due to Dave Bautista.
Yeah.
With all due respect to James Gunn, who I think we've already given plenty of credit, I do not think... I would argue that Drax is the one character he has written the worst. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much of that's Gunn, how much that's Marvel, but it's very important that we acknowledge that Dave Bautista took a role that would have killed most people's careers, let alone an established actor, and made it work. And not only that, but he used that as a springboard to other projects, to where he would appear in James Bond as a minor villain. Still, big role to appear in James Bond. I believe his character's name was Mr. Hyde, alongside Daniel Craig. Maybe you guys have heard of him.
No, a time or two.
Then he would go on to do comedies, like I think it was My Spy was one, and he was just in Glass Onion on Netflix. But
Batista was in Glass Onion?
Yeah, he was in that movie.
Oh, I didn't know he was in it.
Yeah, he's in it. And he also had his own like zombie horror movie with Zack Snyder.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Like, the dude has done really good work, and major props to him for his career and know what he wants to do. But there's one story we haven't talked about yet, which is really weird to say in an hour-long episode where I have pretty much exclusively given background and Shoshima's barely said 2 words.
I've said more than Groot has said.
That's true. You've said 5 words.
And I'm opening my cans of worms.
Do you know, Shoshima, about the power struggle that was going on in Marvel at this time?
You know, that sounds familiar, but I don't remember exactly what you're talking about.
So there was a creative committee in Marvel at this time. And this was before Kevin Feige got the whole, like, everything under his entire... No, that was Kevin. That's a She-Hulk reference, by the way. But the... at this point, Feige was one of the producers. Like, he had produced and been involved in the MCU at this point, but he was not the head honcho.
Yeah.
He was actually in a power struggle with the Marvel creative community.
Yeah, that does sound familiar.
And they were pushing Marvel Television. We had a long discussion about this in our first cut that unfortunately did not make it into Winter Soldier, about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. like really had this weird struggle of like they had to acknowledge the MCU, but nothing that happened in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ever got addressed in the movies. That's a big part of it, was because the Marvel films and Marvel Television were split, and the creative committee was involved with that. And this movie, Guardians of the Galaxy, is actually what led to Feige taking full control.
See, this movie just is greatness.
Because James Gunn has publicly gone on the record and stated that the creative community did not want to include the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And Feige fought for Gunn. So Gunn and Feige both fought really hard to keep it in. They obviously won out, but hilariously enough, this was this decision that made the higher-ups at Disney, who had bought Marvel at this time, go, Feige's our guy. He has the finger on the pulse of what works.
Yeah.
Because his idea and Gunn's idea, of course, were a big part of what made this movie work so well, was the soundtrack was so iconic, as we talked about at the beginning of the pod. So, hilariously enough, not long after this movie, the creative committee was dissolved, and Feige took full control of the MCU for Phase 3. So this movie was super impactful for not just the MCU as establishing as a powerhouse where it basically couldn't miss.
Yeah.
You took literally a bottom tier group of heroes,
a D, maybe C tier team, and
made a
blockbuster out of it.
Made a blockbuster hit out of it, to where I think Guardians of the Galaxy was one of the most successful MCU films of all time. Like, I think it's up there with like most successful. And we're talking alongside like Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, which were the culmination of, like 17 movies across 10 years.
Yeah.
It's insane to think about that Guardians is that well thought of and that successful, is to put it in that group. Especially in hindsight, when you're looking at like all the predictions of its failure we talked about at the beginning of the pod. So there's a couple things I want to address that we talked about in the Winter Soldier pod. And that's the criticisms of how the Guardians were handled in other films. James Gunn and Chris Pratt have both gone on the record and said they did not approve of how Peter Quill was handled in Infinity War. They would not have had Quill hesitate. They would not have had him have that emotional reaction. But as I was watching Guardians, I couldn't help but notice that Quill is impulsive, and he is emotional, and he does react that way. The case in point is that Walkman he got from his mother. When one of the guards takes it, he literally risks his own escape from the prison to go get it back. And before that, he tries to challenge the guard to take it back. He's not afraid to make impulsive decisions based on an emotional connection. So, as much as I love James Gunn and respect his opinion and his lore on everything that's happened, and I normally agree with him, I have to disagree with him here, is that Quill absolutely had that characteristic in this movie. And he also has it in Guardians 2, which we'll talk about coming up soon.
Yeah, no, I didn't think it was like
too out of character.
Yeah.
It was a stupid thing to do, and I think maybe that's where the point was. But
out of anybody to make a rash, stupid decision like that,
he was the character there. Like in that team, he was the one who would have done it.
He was the one that was gonna do it.
Yeah, more so than maybe Drax, but at that point, Drax had really mellowed out.
Yeah,
like he was not the
Drax has enough character development to mellow out and not do that.
Yeah, so, but again, it's something that that's a little criticism. We've already talked about how neither Mantis nor Drax really got their day in the sun. Surprisingly enough, though, I think Rocket was treated the best out of all the Guardians. Groot, I think, to a lesser extent, he had that pretty badass moment, too. But
yeah, he had a couple moments.
It's absolutely a criticism, and I just wanted to address that here, because we did talk about it during Winter Soldier a bit, where, the Guardians were not necessarily... There is a perception among fans, and even among James Gunn and the actors themselves, that the Guardians were not necessarily treated the best in any of the crossovers. And I think that's... While there's a point to it, I think that there's a line there, and it's tough to find. Some will disagree with me. That's okay. But yeah, Quill obviously having that emotional reaction, like rewatching Guardians, I was reminded that the dude literally went after a guard in prison because he took his mother's Walkman. So I don't think that's that big of a stretch.
No.
So I've talked a lot this pod.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want to talk about Shoshima when it comes to this movie? Any comments, favorite scenes, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Rocket just being a dickhead, stealing people's leg.
And he tries to get an eye later on nowhere.
Oh, and then there was was it Testicle Face or what was it?
Taser Face.
Yeah, but they called him, what'd they call him? Like the nickname or?
Well, that's Guardians 2.
Oh, okay.
Taserface is in Guardians 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting it mixed up. I thought that was in this movie.
Shoshima did not do the homework, by the way.
Nope. I'm not bad at homework.
Yes, he is.
Just like in school.
Yep.
Okay, so, edit that out because we're good at editing.
We're not editing that out.
And then, but yeah, just, I do like between Gamora and Quill, like that character development seemed good.
That chemistry is really good.
And the chemistry's well, that, they kind of were like flirty back and forth, but it wasn't like too forced or instant.
No. In fact, Gamora was outright rejecting him for the vast majority of 2 movies.
Exactly.
And apparently the third one.
Okay.
According to the teaser.
Yeah, I really haven't seen too many of the teasers.
Yeah, that's apparently going to be like a big part of the plot. I don't know for sure, but like the whole Guardians 3 is like Quill trying to find Gamora.
Oh, okay.
That's supposed to be a big part of the plot. So, again, we haven't seen it yet, so apologies if we're off, but that's what the trailers and stuff have been leading.
Okay.
I don't think that's, like, spoiler territory.
But yeah, I do like just Rocket just randomly tinkering with stuff, and like, what was it? Quill was just going through Rocket's things. It's like, that's a bomb, don't touch it. Why the fuck do you just have a bomb laying around?
And this is after he was, like, tearing apart the ship. Like, Rocket tearing apart the ship, so yeah.
So yeah, I did love Rocket's character. Groot just had too many big moments,
Yeah, for sure. Also, that just reminded me that Quill has like one of the most nasty lines in the MCU in this movie. Do you remember what it is? It involves a black light.
Oh, what was it? Because they have a black light. They're like, let's go look at Quill's bed or something. Right?
No. That was I think in Guardians 2. Here it's Gamora is like trying to insult Quill, but like, Quill, your ship's a mess. And Quill like looks at it like with pride, and he's like, oh man, it's a good thing she doesn't have a black light, because if you did, you would just see stuff
Oh,
everywhere.
yeah.
And I was just like, ah! Like, I had forgotten that scene was in there.
I did forget about that.
Yeah.
I remember now that you mention it.
Yeah. Yes. Woo-wee.
Oh,
Again, these are not good people. The Guardians are not good people.
No. But yeah, no, I mean, I've said it before, but just how they bring this band of misfits together and, just make a good movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I think I've said enough on this. Again, where do you rank this probably like in the MCU for you? Like just generally, you don't have to give me like a specific, but like, is this like top 5 for you? Or?
Oh, I think easy. I mean, if not top 3.
The not top 3. Wow, you rank it that high, huh?
It's pretty high.
Man, yeah, I put it top 5. It's not my top 3. I would probably put Infinity War, Endgame, and Winter Soldier in my top 3. But this is probably number 4 or number 5. Like it's nowhere close.
Yeah.
The other one for me is Spider-Man No Way Home.
No Way Home's pretty good too.
It would probably be my top 5.
Yeah, it gets tricky with, Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
Because they're like 2 movies, but it's one, like obviously the same, but yeah.
Yeah.
And they are separate movies, so if we're counting it as the same, then
Yeah.
maybe it is closer to top 5, but yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 separate movies. Like I'll make this argument all day because Infinity War, Thanos is the protagonist, or he's the main character. Endgame is the culmination of everything else. So they're 2 sides of the same coin, obviously. But to me, I'm like, yeah, it's basically it's a sequel. Like Endgame's a sequel, but yeah, Thanos is the one we follow.
Yeah.
In his journey. So. I wouldn't know if he's the protagonist per se, but he's definitely the main character and the center focus. So
Yeah.
where he's not in Endgame. Endgame, in fact, he only actually appears in the beginning and at the end. So, yeah. But so you rank this in your top 3, huh? I mean, I don't blame you, but it's a good choice.
If I'd have to get down in the nitty gritty, maybe not quite top 3, but it is definitely up there. It's one of my favorite.
It's a candidate for top 3, which is still like really high praise for this movie.
Yeah.
So. Cool. Well, again, thanks for being here. Thanks for having this discussion. This was, I think, a really good episode. Sorry I talked so much through it, but
again, I try to interject where I can.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. But anyway, everyone, thank you all very much for watching. We'll be back again next week, and I'm going to drop this kind of teaser now. Don't know when yet, but we might have a very special guest.
Dun, dun, dun.
Coming on the podcast pretty soon.
It's not Tanner, is it?
No, Tanner always appears.
Oh.
He's here. See? Hi, Tanner. Tanner, you want to raise up? There you go. See? There he is.
Tanner boy.
So we'll end with a little Tanner boy here. But anyway, guys, we're going to wrap up. Shoshima wants to get home and probably get some rest and maybe spend some time with his kids. Maybe. But with that being said, my name is Shenzo the Lost. That's Shoshima 1016. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.